All right, and welcome to the 4-7 podcast today. My name is RJ. This is Mike, and we have a special guest today. We have David from PAX217, among many other things since then. But we are going to talk to him today from everything from PAX217 to what's going on today and everything in between. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Yes. Stoked to be here. Glad to converse. It's going to be a good time.
If you see my
I'm very
face,
excited.
If you see my face glistening, it's because my office is literally 125 degrees. Holy crap.
Nice. Well, hey, we are talking to you. I think you're in California. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I live in Laguna Beach, California.
Nice. We are all the way on the other side. We are both in Rhode Island. So it's a bit of the opposite. But we are talking to, again, David from PAX217. Our whole podcast, we've been talking to people who were involved in any shape or form in the Christian rock scene, all the way in the 90s, all the way to today. And you are one of the bands that I listened to all the way back in 2000. I say all the way back. For some people, that's like, that was yesterday. But it was an amazing time for music for me. I got into Christian rock. I got into rock in the 2000s area. And I actually saw you guys at Six Flags, of all places.
Oh, really?
Back in the day. And I want to say it was one of your later shows in New England.
Ah, yeah, okay.
I want to say they labeled it a Fall Quest.
I want to say I wish I could remember it. I'd love to be like, oh, yeah, man, I remember. I mean, there's many that I do remember, but I mean, we were doing 200 to 250 shows a year solid. And so there are many that I wish my mind could remember, but that's so cool, man.
Well, I have to admit, after reading some of your interviews from the past, this was the time frame, I think, where you guys were at the height of touring, at the height of stress. And I think it was shortly after that you guys disbanded. So I think I got it in there, and I saw you guys right before then. So okay. I'm not surprised that you don't remember.
So this was what year again? Do you think it was?
I want to say it was definitely after the Engage album. I want to say Check Your Pulse may have just come out,
okay.
maybe.
Yep. That was near the ending of things. That's cool.
Yeah. But hey, you're back, or at least you did a reunion show a couple of years ago, which was really awesome to hear. And you've been up to a lot of really cool things.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we had such an amazing time doing the reunion. We did a reunion show in 2013, House of Blues, Anaheim. And then we did another one with the Prayer Chain, actually, which is really fun. Tmpl, who's a singer and also puts on a lot of events and has for years here, and was a huge support to us in our whole career, building up, and loved him so much. And he asked us last minute to do a reunion show with them, which is really fun, and just had a blast that night. And then we also did one with the Supertones for their last show, which the Supertones guys were like, older brothers to us. We, grew up going to their shows, helping them with their gear. Our original guitar player, Ethan Luck, who is still one of my close friends, he and I started PAX when we were 15, and he played with the Supertones for years, played guitar. And so just a lot of close connection there, and just had an amazing time. It was so fun to get back on the stage again and freak out for an hour. Felt good.
Ethan Luck, he's been in so many bands over the years.
Yep.
He's been in Demon Hunter, Reliant K, Supertones, PAX217. And in an interview I heard, he says he started Project 86 at one time with Andrew Schwab.
Mm-hmm.
He was in Value Pack.
Mm-hmm.
He was like started the fire in like the Southern California Christian music scene for years.
Yeah, Ethan and I literally, we started PAX. I was the original bass player, and Ethan played guitar, and we started that band. And then shortly after that, his cousin is actually Matt Wignall, and Matt Wignall played with. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna blank. Right
it was a smaller band, right? In Tooth and Nail.
Railroad. Oh my gosh. Anyways, Matt Wignall is a legend. I love Matt. He's been in so many cool bands and produced so many cool bands over the years. And so yeah, there was just, it was just like show after show, and Andrew Schwab and those guys, Ethan was their bass player and wrote a bunch with them on that first record and played with them, and went on to just play with, so you're right, so many bands. He's so talented.
How was it growing up in that Southern California scene? Because from in my personal perspective, like that Southern California scene had so many great bands like yourself. It had Dogwood, Project 86, had the Supertones. It really that whole Tooth and Nail era of that Southern California. How was it really growing up in that area? And really, like, was that part of your influence from the scene growing up in that
Oh
area?
yeah, for sure. I mean, I give much thanks to everybody who was involved in that, from the bands to the promoters to the pastors that were, enabling us to practice in their youth group rooms or whatever. We had a lot of support, and that was, a huge thing. Is, any artist that comes up, they're never, well, they're very rarely doing it completely on their own.
Yeah.
And so, I look back and I'm just like, oh man, the list of people that just came around and said, yeah, you can use our place, or you can do this, or here's a drum kit, or here's, whatever it was, to actually being in the scene, and people creating the scene, which was, there was a church here locally, that Jason Carson from the Supertones was a huge part of, and was the youth pastor at for quite some time. I forget how long. And um, they had these underground, they had this little place, every place, by the way, is called the underground, or it's called, extreme, or, whatever. So this is another underground. And it was this really cool youth room under the church. And it was like this big space, and it was super cool. And they had, every year they had these big shows, and MXPX, and, I mean, so many bands that you guys would know, that we all played with, that we were around, that we were influenced by, that were, especially the guys that were 2, 3, 4 years older than us that were playing, that had a huge impact on us. And I'm grateful for that. It was really cool. A lot of cool
Nice.
moments.
Yeah. I have a
So
question
growing
for
up
you,
in
too.
that scene. Oh, sorry. Go.
No, I have a question for you. So, it seems like a lot of it seems like the people you associate with were signed to Tooth and Nail Records. That was big in Southern California because when Brendan Ebel started that in like '94, he really helped that underground scene. Was that your goal, to be signed to Tooth and Nail when Forefront came around? What were you thinking? Were you waiting for Tooth and Nail to say, "Hey, I want to sign you," or were you content with Forefront?
Um, well, I mean, Tooth and Nail was, Brandon is a brilliant business guy, in his marketing and his like way of really being in the scene and helping create a scene by the bands that he signed. And
Yeah.
so we knew a lot of, but yeah, we were friends with so many artists on Tooth and Nail, and we all thought it was cool. And for whatever reason, they weren't, Brandon knew us. He saw us play shows. We were at all the same places, and so he knew us, and that just never really came up. There was some interest at some point. I don't remember specifically right now how far that went, but um, I just got lucky. We met our A&R guy at a Tom Fest up in Washington, which was a cool, like, kind of legend Christian music festival put on by a guy named Mikey Bridges. And
Mikey Bridges. I haven't heard
yeah,
that name in a long time.
right. So that festival kind of, that's where we met our A&R guy, and there was a ton of Tooth and Nail bands that we were playing with and friends with. And also, I think at that time, uh, I mean, PAX217 wasn't cool compared to like the Dingies, or um, a lot of hardcore bands and things that people that we were playing with, punk rock bands. We were fusing a bunch of styles together, and we were experimenting and being 15 and 16 and doing the best we could to write the music we were writing. And so a lot of those bands, straight up, they just didn't get what we were doing, or they weren't into it, or we weren't cool enough for them, or whatever. And that's not a pity story, but it is kind of is what it is. There's a lot of bands that we would go to play with them, and we'd be stoked, like, oh, cool, we're going to play with so-and-so. And they would be like, you guys are like this like rap reggae thing, and we don't rock thing, and we don't really get it, or we're just not into it, whatever. And so It took a minute, and I think Forefront, in a sense, took a big risk on us because they had whatever DC Talk and Audio Journal and all these bands that they had built up over the years, and we were this new young band from California, and didn't have a bunch of touring history or anything like that to really validate. But they believed in us, and we did what we did with them, which was
Nice.
cool.
So you got the attention of Forefront. How did that come about? The actual signing and really getting into the recording studio for the first time with them with the 217 album. What was that like for you?
Yeah. Well, the process was like a 10 or 11 month signing process. So we were in a lot of conversations. There was a lot of actually, a label needs to be smart about it. Are these kids going to break up next week by the time we sign them? So there was a long process there of actually getting through all the paperwork, and then we got really lucky that the POD guys knew us, and Mark, our A&R guy, who's an amazing guy, I love him so much, and he reached out to Howard Benson, who did our first record, who was also the guy who produced the POD Southtown record, which blew up. And Howard was like, really generous. He did the record for much, much less than their the POD Atlantic budget. And so, we were very lucky to make a record in, I think we made that album. We made that album in about a month, and it was an amazing process. And we were really, really lucky to have someone as high level as Howard come in and help us work through the stuff that we just were dumb and naive about. As far as how to. We had recorded several demos and worked with some really cool guys that had believed in us. Scott Saletta from Plank Eye, actually, we did a demo with him that helped that signing process happen for sure. And several of the songs that were on our first album were on that demo, a couple of them. And so, we're just really lucky that we got to work with someone as high level. I mean, Howard helped us. Howard kicked our butts, and Howard helped us really dial in, bring a sound together that was sort of like, we didn't know what we were doing. We weren't super guitar savvy with guitar sounds, for example, or whatever. But we had a very clear ideas of what we wanted, and man, I just owe that guy a lot. He was really cool and a great teacher. I mean, so many great stories out of that album. Also, we recorded in this house that was the guy who owned that house was one of Michael Jackson's writers, and so we recorded in this insanely cool house in Sherman Oaks, and we Bobby Brooks, our engineer, worked with Stevie Wonder and had all these legend stories. And so we, worked with Ice-T and Body Count and all these bands and these artists that, we would just hear the wildest stories, and it, it was pretty inspiring, minus maybe some of the stories were maybe not so inspiring, but
When you signed to Forefront Records, did you realize the history of Forefront Records? Because in the 90s, Forefront Records was like the record label because in the 90s they had the beginnings of Skillet, they had Bleach, they had Rebecca St. James, all the Toby Mac, Michael Tate, Kevin Max, DC Talk, all of Audio Adrenaline. They had so many other great bands. Did you realize the history that you were getting yourself into, and kind of the greatness of this label?
Yeah, I mean, we had a pretty fair understanding. We became super close with the Bleach guys. Love that you brought them up. They just did a reunion show this past weekend, I think. And they were just amazing and became really good, like, label mate brothers to us that showed us a lot and stuff. And our record deal, just point blank, our record deal is like a horrific record deal, like in the scheme of the music business. And so we knew what we were getting into, as far as like, oh, this label has all these big Christian artists and they've helped them become successful, and that was appealing. And also, we actually really had a desire to be on a mainstream label from day one.
Yeah.
But we were in the mix with all, Tooth and Nail and all these labels that we're bringing up. And it was like, we just saw it as like, oh, this is cool. They have mainstream distribution. Maybe this will help get us down the path, et cetera. And, years later, we end up getting out of our deal towards the end of the ban, because it wasn't all that great, and it was really difficult to work with. And there was a lot of great people there. So, it's interesting in the corporate space of music, you get close with a bunch of people that you really like and you really appreciate what they're doing at the label. And yet at the end of the day, um, the sometimes the business fit isn't the best, but
Well,
but at the time we did have a really, we were really excited, and we had we were like, oh cool, this is, and we knew too that we were kind of the, at some level we were sort of like this new young hip band from California compared to some of the artists that they had for a long time, or that were kind of older, less
yeah.
edgy, or whatever words you want to use. I mean, it's all kind of feels cheeseball to use, but there was, edgy, whatever that means. But it was a really cool experience. Yeah, it was extreme. It was a really cool experience to have, so many people on that label and the artists on that label really showing us love. Like I remember playing some big festivals and, hanging out with Rebecca St. James, or, the DC Talk guys, or Toby specifically was, really just a big hearted, loving guy who was always like, yeah, PAX guys, what's up? And so there was a lot of love that we experienced from so many people at that label, and through those artists. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see it because you are right. Because when you guys were signed, if I remember correctly, I could be totally wrong on this one, but they didn't really have a young hip band anymore. Because like Skillet, the Skillet today wasn't the Skillet back then. They were a very, very different band.
Mm-hmm.
Bleach was always a solid band, but Audio Jones was around for years. DC Talk was around for years. Rebecca St. James was around for years. They didn't have something that really spoke to the 17 to 25 crowd. So you are, I agree with you. You were definitely that new upcoming band on that label.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were kind of, that, and so that first record, they put a lot into us to build out, and we had a strong first record, and it was cool. We were really, really lucky. It was beautiful.
That's awesome. I mean, so in between those albums, so you had 217 and then Engage. A lot happened. The departure of your brother, and then coming on was Bobby, Joey, and Chris, if I'm not mistaken. And you guys started to record for the Engage album, which is kind of where I came in. I then ended up going back and listening to the older album, but Engage was a super powerful album in my opinion. It was hard. The raps that were in there were, lack of a better word, credible. They were really, really good. There wasn't anything in my ears at the time in the Christian world. And so I caught on to that pretty quick. I was also listening to some of the earlier Spoken stuff. Which in their rap stuff for the Spoken stuff was a little similar to me. It was really, really good. But a lot of stuff's going on. You have new people coming in. You have your brother leaving. What were some of the feelings behind that with your brother leaving and then some of these guys coming on?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, that whole process of our second album was like the classic second album, like the sophomore album. And like, how are they going to pull off making something that's decent, or great for that matter, past their first album that had a lot of hype behind it and a lot of love shown to it. And yeah, my brother not coming back. So to really paint that picture, to back up just a little bit, my brother Aaron, aka Squid, back then, he was 15 when we made the first album, and he had the opportunity to tour with us, but actually chose to stay in high school and wanted to stay in high school. And we were bummed, particularly me. I was his brother. He and I were the ones that kept, PAX essentially broke up when I was the bass player and he was the drummer, and Ethan that we were talking about earlier left to go play with Supertones. And my brother and I were, he was like, God, like 14, and I'm like 18, and I'm like, hey, do you want to do this band? I'm going to do this band. And he's like, yeah, I'm in. And so we did it, and we got signed, and we made that first album. And then he had the opportunity to tour, and he just chose to stay in school instead of touring. And we ended up needed to find some other drummers. And so, um, that said, it was just like we weren't super connected. He was in high school, and there's just a lot going on. And so we started touring, and eventually met Joey through the Fold Zan guys. I remember seeing Joey play a Fold Zandura show and just being like, oh my God, who's that kid? That guy's dope. Let's play with him, and asked him to come play some shows with us, and came out. And so we had such an incredible experience with Joey. I love Joey so much. And yeah, and then actually, so Bobito the chef, our DJ, actually, we met him on our first tour ever, which he was in a band called Big Dog Small Fence, and they were kind of like a Sublime, like reggae, Long Beach hip hop kind of band. They were cool, and they did like ska reggae stuff with a little bit of like rap moments, and and we hit it off with him, and we had a bunch of turntable stuff on our first album, and we were like, man, we'd love to get a DJ playing with us live. It'd be so fun. So he had actually come on and played a bunch of shows with us before that album. He'd been touring with us for quite a while, but his brother Tito, or Chris, came in and started playing percussion. And I actually don't remember the exact timing on that, when he started touring full time with us, but it was great, and we wanted to put on a killer live show, and the percussion and the turntables added a lot. Yeah, going into that second album, we worked our brains out. I mean, we worked super hard writing stuff, and we were also touring so much. And I think, we weren't set up as a band. Like, I was writing most of the lyrics, the melodies, the guitar parts, a lot of it, especially the first album. The second album, we just had we had grown so much as musicians and touring a lot, and just teaches you so much that we really started writing more together. I was still writing a lot of guitar parts and ideas and hooks and choruses and things, but the whole process was just one after another. And then I remember we were touring somewhere, and I had a backpack stolen, and I had all my lyrics in that backpack. Everything I had been writing for like a year and a half was, I wasn't on Evernote or Google Docs then, it's like I had a classic old school book with a bunch of stuff, and I had 2 or 3 actually books in that backpack, and they were all taken out of a hotel room. And man, I just felt so defeated, and I'm like, what am I going to do? And I was just struggling. I was struggling with what to say. I had a lot of internal tensions going on that, it was a challenge. So going into that record was really interesting because we were really excited about the energy and a lot of the song ideas and the music that we had written, but there was a lot of music that was written without words and without melodies, and it was really frustrating for me. I was really challenged, and I spent some time actually working with, I think this is a cool part of the story of that album, which is I started working with Charlie Peacock, who's a really well-known legendary, yes, thank you for the validation. Yeah, I was going to say a legend producer who's worked with Switchfoot. Actually, Jerome's worked with him a bunch.
Yeah.
And Charlie was our A&R guy's father-in-law, and so I spent like 5 days at Charlie's house in Nashville and writing with him, and he was working on other projects, but I was basically doing like a writing workshop with Charlie, living there with them and writing. And I wrote basically 2 songs were started there on that album, working on that album. And I'll See You, and one other song. I'm sorry, I'm blanking right now. I'll get to it in a second. So that process was really helpful for me to kind of break through back into the writing, of just having a really amazing songwriter sort of reflect back ideas and be like, nah, that doesn't work. Try this, try that. And then when we went to make the Engage album, we made it in San Francisco at this killer studio with this awesome guy named Philip Steer. And there was just, it's so funny when you listen, and you go, oh, that was so great. And you say, oh, there's a lot of like it was harder, right? Isn't that what you said, RJ? It's kind of like,
yeah.
You experienced it as like a more aggressive album, and it was. And there was a lot of that was just very true energy for us and for me. I was writing stuff where I was just just frustrated about a lot of stuff. And a lot of that stuff was like finished like the day before, or I'm up writing lyrics until like 5 in the morning and going in the next day at 11 to record it, sleeping for 4 hours and going back in and singing, making the album. So it was a cool process, and it kicked my butt. It was one of the first times I ever remember having an actual panic attack one night. And just going, I'm so stressed out trying to make this album. This is crazy, but it came together, and it's part of the tension of the pain of making art, and you just dig in with everything you got and bleed out your arms and do whatever you need to do to make the thing happen. And it was cool.
Making the album, making your albums, and specifically your record deal. You mentioned that it wasn't the best deal you could ever have gotten. And then also,
really nice way of putting it.
Yeah, it was trash. No, I'm just kidding. But remember you saying that, and then the 2000s really, 99, 2000 really hurt a lot of bands. That's when Napster really started coming out. That's when iTunes started coming out, and labels were just draining of money, and they were really trying to figure out how they can make money. So they had to sell. Small labels were being bought up by other labels and all that jazz. And I think Forefront was sold out maybe a few years, maybe 2005 or 6 to Capital Christian. You had a lot go on in your career as a musician. How does this, being a young person, how does your faith stay grounded, or did it stay grounded? What was that like during this time? I know I said a lot there, but
yeah. So if I'm hearing right, just what's the tension that was?
Yeah, like how does your faith stay grounded during all this?
Gosh. Well, all I can say, I can say, first of all, I should say, I hope that it was.
Yeah.
I sure did my best with what I had to work with. And I have to give our band a lot of credit for, we did a lot of work as a band internally, and we made it a major, it was an absolute commitment to dig into the betterment of ourselves constantly. And we were lucky to have several guys who were like spiritual mentors to us, that were constantly connected with us and reaching out, and knew what it was like to be on the road and how taxing that is to your system overall. And there was a lot, there was a lot that we did. We constantly had Bible studies, we were constantly reading the Bible, and we had meetings after every show almost. And we had at the last, maybe it was a year and a half of the band, we had a therapist that we worked with who was amazing, that really came alongside of us and helped us work together. So when you talk about faith being grounded, by the way, I just want to make sure, for me, like how I interpret that language, is like, some people say, when you think of faith, what does that mean? That's a pretty broad term, and some people have exactly what they know what that means, and other people go, oh, what do you mean by faith? And so I would just say, like, my faith at that time was like very committed to trying to understand my experience of God. And also, I will say that, admittedly, it was quite legalistic in our structure, because we saw, so there's an interesting thing there for me, that's, we saw a lot of bands around us like really hurting, and a lot of guys in those bands making rough decisions in their lives, and doing things that weren't healthy and helpful for them and their families, or whoever, right, whoever it affects around them. And we just, I was always like, I don't want to fall into that space of, I just knew it just taxes you, like, until you tour, until you spend 250 days a year on the road, like, you can't understand that experience, right? And so, and within the context of like a quote unquote Christian band, or a quote unquote Christian label, or Christian industry, or my favorite one would just be Christian community. But within the context of that, there's so much pressure. You know, there is just so much pressure on you to show up and perform and be this, you know, God incarnate yourself, but you're a singer in a band. And, you know, quite frankly, you're just like, dude, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. I'm just
Yeah.
trying
Yeah.
to make it through the day, you know? Like I just barely had $2 to eat lunch. And I got to this place where I'm going to play and I'm exhausted. And we just drove 18 hours. And my wife and I are doing so well back at home. And, you know, whatever the story looks like in that moment, there's so much pressure to also show up and be this like this completely embodied, you know, healed leader that people expect you to be. And so for us, it was just like we just kind of almost to our detriment probably just like gripped on harder to like practices of saying, okay, look, let's like, you know, let's like have time where we're listening to like really uplifting music while we're driving, or like let's like, you know, do a Bible study and invite other dudes on the tours to come join us if they want. Or, you know, we were doing what we could. Right now, today, looking back, I sure wish I would have had a lot more tools than just like, hey, let's do a Bible study, because
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you know that's nice, or you know, and can be helpful, but there's just a lot of other things that are much more practical that actually help you better, to be honest. But um and I know some people that maybe are listening that are Christian might go, what, how could you say that? And I would just say, like, there's a physical body that gets taxed, and there's a lot of things like eating healthy and doing things like breath work, or you know, exercising or
Yeah.
practicing yoga or whatever, that help you stay healthy, right? And then you can be a clearer mind when you're out on tour under all those pressures, you know. So I
Yeah.
don't mean to negate one or the other. I just mean that, you know, it's like me saying I'm just going to read the Bible every day and my whole life's going to be great. It's like, well, no, like there's wisdom in there, and also it doesn't fix all the interpersonal
Yep.
communication issues between a band or a relationship or whatever, right? So hope that makes sense.
No, it does. And then the reason I was asking that question is because before you came on the air, you know, I don't want to say the band's name, but me and IG were talking about a band, and they were a Christian rock band, and now they're not Christian at all anymore. And me, RJ and I were having a discussion, you know, because the band was saying, well, the reason we're not Christian anymore is because when we needed help the most from the Christian community, they were the worst and they were the most judgmental towards us. And I was saying to myself, we had a little debate going on about this, and that's what made me think. I'm like, yeah, it's being a Christian artist, you are under the microscope no matter what you do, especially if you're in a hard rock band or if you're a female or whatever. How you dress, what you say, what you do, your actions are under a microscope, and it can be taxing, and it can really, unless you're not, and this is where Ajay and I were discussing about, you need to be really grounded in your faith, because you can be pulled really quick out of like I was thinking of the three soils in the Bible. If you're not grounded, you can be really kind of pulled from that soil if you're not really grounded in your faith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
hear you, man. Yeah,
So
yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, you know, we've established, I think, that throughout the Engage album, it was a very difficult time recording, creating it. I've read, you know, that you mentioned, you know, that you can point out 100 million things you would have done differently. You know, and I think we talked about it earlier where you said, you know, hearing yourself is much different than other people hearing you. For me, that was one of the better albums I'd ever heard, you know, and I still listen to it today.
Thanks,
You know, and a great album. And I know people have come up to you and they've said, like, this song touched me. This song is, and I know as an artist, you must like hearing those, you know, that something that you did, or something that you wrote really reached somebody. And for that album, for me, Counting Down the Days was the song for me, off of that album. And it's funny because that's the least rocky song on the album. That is the acoustic worshipful song, I would call it, even though it's not about that. But yeah, for me, my aunt passed away in 2003, and just hearing that song for me, and I may be totally wrong about what the album or what that song was about, but for me, it really was one of those things of, you know, I'll see you again, and you know, you're in a place that we've talked about before, and for me, that was really encouraging, you know, to listen to that over and over on repeat for a long time. So,
man, that's awesome. I'm so grateful to hear that. Thank you for reflecting that back. And like, yeah, that song was about my grandfather who passed away, and I actually had a last phone call with him when I was on tour in like Kansas. We were staying at some somebody's house, and I remember like talking to him on the phone, and well, I was talking and he was unable to talk, and he could just barely make some little breathing grunt sounds. And unfortunately, he just went down very quick in a couple weeks time, and I wasn't able to get back to see him before he passed. And that was really tough for me. It you know, those are the moments that a lot of people don't talk about when you're touring and you have your grandpa dying and you can't get back, and you're the singer in the band, and you have a responsibility or a call, so to speak, to show up for, oh my gosh, we're going to miss 6 shows, how does that affect everybody, and
Mm.
and the pressure of that just internally and dealing with that. Not that the guys in the band would have totally supported if I had said, hey, I got to go home. I just didn't know he obviously was going to pass, right? And so that song came really from that place of yeah, he always used to say, come and see me sometime. Hey fella, I love you, come and see me sometime. And that's what those lyrics are at the end of the song are about. And so powerful that you connected with that, and I'm sorry to hear about your loss, and that's the gift of music, man. It's like, just we go through our own pains, and then we transmute the energy through sound and lyrics and melody, and then it can help us all further down the path, in our experiences as humans. It's beautiful.
Now, I want to make sure we get into really what you've been doing since then, the last 15 years, because you've been doing some really cool things that I just caught up with over the last year or so. But after the band had disbanded, I think it was 2005-ish, you got into photography. And then from there, which we'll get into towards the end here, you started doing some stuff with men's group type stuff in the Laguna Beach area. So let's start with like just past, or post PAX217. How in the world did you get into photography? And, you seem to be doing well with it. Mike is also a wedding photographer, so maybe you guys will talk more than I will. But how did that come about?
That's funny. Yeah. So, when the band broke up, I literally, band broke up on a Monday, and I believe it was a week or just shy of a week later that I found out my wife and I were going to have our first child. And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I had a friend at the time who was a wedding photographer, and he was like, dude, you should shoot. And I was super into photography. It had always been since I was, young. Since I was 5, I was snapping little point and shoot cameras. And he was like, dude, you'd be great at it, whatever. And I was like, wedding photography? I'm not going to be a wedding photographer. What are you talking about? That sounds bizarre. And especially with the, whatever my ego is doing with my identity as a singer in a band, I'm like, I'm not a wedding photographer. I'm a singer in a band. What are you talking about? But it was really cool. In a matter of like a year's time, I shot all these crappy weddings with this terrible, well, they were actually a really cool company, but the weddings were often not the nicest weddings, and just tough. And I was getting paid nothing to do them. And then I got really good really fast, and I was grateful. I met some of the best wedding photographers in the country that became really close friends, just godsends to me. And I started shooting these crazy $2 million weddings, not every weekend, but a lot of them are, really, really high end weddings. And it was a gift, and it was also really stressful. And and so I'm no longer a wedding photographer. However, I do still shoot, and I kind of moved about 5 years ago. I moved into kind of the more corporate commercial work, and was just tired of missing my kids on the weekends.
Me and you have a lot in common then. So I was a wedding photographer for about 15 years, and I liked it. It was great, but you're always away. So I moved into, I was doing like 30 weddings a year. Now I'm doing, this is my last year doing weddings because I like being home, seeing my kids, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And seeing my wife. So now I'm actually doing commercial photography. I'm doing more commercial real estate photography. We're doing like, 1,300 shoots a year. Mm-hmm. And it's nuts. Wow. But actually, remember Noggin Toboggan?
Yeah.
The lead singer of Noggin Toboggan turned to wedding photographer.
Oh, okay.
I forgot what he was, his name, but he was a beast of wedding photographer. But On a side note, I'm just going to ask this question, and RJ, it's only going to last 2 seconds. I'm asking this question. So, what do you shoot with?
Okay, we're going to tech talk.
There we go. 407 podcast is officially over, RJ. You can go home and do whatever.
Yeah, right. I shoot with a Sony A7R3 and
Nice.
a couple fixed lenses, man. I'm super simple. I've had tons of gear, and then I've also become more and more of a minimalist, and I just got all I need is an 85 and a 50, and once in a while if I'm shooting architecture, I'll shoot something wide. But so yeah, I shot Canon for 20 years, and
Yeah.
I now shoot Sony. So
I just moved to Sony with A7 threes and A7S threes.
cool.
About 4 years ago. All right, RJ, tech talk is done. Back to RJ.
And that concludes our
Yeah,
tech talk with.
I have my phone. My phone does.
Yeah,
my
I was
phone
gonna
does
say,
pretty well. But,
honestly, I don't carry a camera around at all anymore. But anyway, so I went from wedding photography just to kind of bring that to commercial corporate work, and in between there, I went through a divorce when I was 34, and during that time, I had someone come into my life who's a coach who just changed my life more than anybody has, and just a brilliant, amazing, deep woman. And I was so profoundly affected and really truly transformed through that coaching work. And much thanks to hot yoga that I just was like, oh my gosh, I want to help other people too. And serve in that way. And so I became a life coach myself, went through some Master Coaches Academy and a bunch of other trainings and things. And so that's actually kind of, I'm in this interim where I do both. I still, shoot and do the photography thing here and there, but mostly on the way out from that completely. And I'm leaning back into coaching and working with people and just, supporting people through their paths and their journeys. And then in the meantime, I had an idea for a brand, and it's called Tmpl, Tmpl. And it started with a group of guys who I just reached out to, a bunch of friends who were here in town in Laguna, and who were mostly artists, creatives at some level, who were kind of siloed, and all kind of in the same age range, like 30s, 40s, and just disconnected, and didn't have a space to really experience a brotherhood, and the more and more I go, the more and more I get to have breaths in this life, I realize that, there's a lot of us men specifically, I mean, women too, but a lot of men particularly just live in this body that says, I have to do it on my own. If I don't, I'm weak. And a lot of guys burn out really hard. And that's why there's a really high suicide rate. And there's, with white men, like all colors of men, but white men specifically are, very prone to suicide and et cetera, et cetera. And, I'm a single dad, and I have two amazing kids. And, through my path and my suffering that I've experienced in this life, I've just also thankfully healed a lot of that, and continuing to work on that and heal my own life. And it's just like, dude, I just want to show up with real people. And so this brotherhood that I have now, and actually I'm a part of another men's group with another group of guys who are just amazing humans who've done a lot of personal spiritual work that is not elitist, but it's like guys who are really conscious and aware and spend a lot of time really focusing on what I always say, which is what the question I ask every day is like, hey, what would love do? What would love do in this scenario every time, and so the coaching work, and it's like, do you guys ever see Good Will Hunting?
I haven't, but I've heard it.
Okay, it's a great movie with Mark Wahlberg and Robin Williams. And there's this line in that movie that's always stuck with me, which Robin Williams is this like, he's a therapist, and he's kind of like little beaten down, a little downtrodden. And Mark Wahlberg comes into his life. He's Will, and he's, being this therapist for Will, and they're pushing up against each other quite hard. And Robin Williams is sharing a story, and he says, look, kid, I teach, kid. I never said I was good at it, and I hope I can swear, by the way. I'm sorry about that.
We're not live.
I'm sorry about word, but if you need to bleep me out, it's fine. I have a problem with swearing, really. But anyways,
RJ swears at me all the time, so the
Good,
whole
good.
the whole podcast is a bleep
That
fest
is
anyway.
untrue. That is untrue.
But anyways, he says, "Hey, I teach this. I didn't say I was good at it, And he's making this joke, like just because I'm a teacher of the thing doesn't mean I've mastered it, right? The whole point of being the teacher is to become the master of this thing. I think for me, and so with coaching work and leaning into just more and more understanding of how to be a better human and how to like love people in a deeper way, and how can I do that? First of all, I got to love me first. I have to like dig deep down and understand the parts of me that wants to hate myself, and then flip it and choose love every time and begin to heal that stuff. And it's easier said than done. And so being a part of these groups and leading this one has been a huge gift to my life, and being a part of these guys' lives has been monumental. So it's huge. Feels good.
That's great. It's really awesome to hear that you are, in the business of helping other people, with your life, with your businesses. It's great. I went through a divorce 5 years ago or so as well. And that's a tough space to be in, which is obvious to say. But as a Christian too, I think there is a whole nother element, for me, that once you're not a married guy anymore, there's no place for you in a lot of circles. There's there was the married group you were in and all your married friends, and now you're a single dad. I am with 2 kids. And now what do? Do I go to the college group now? But I'm 30, I'm 34 at the time,
Right.
and my church at the time, we had our college group was kind of a lame be college age till like 40, as long as you're not married. And so like I'm like a 35-year-old hanging out with just a bunch of 22-year-olds going to concerts and stuff, and there's just no place for
Which is
me
awesome,
and my age. So it's
which
really
is
cool to
awesome.
hear.
Listen, that's when you
I mean, believe me, I felt
No, going to concerts with 22-year-olds is like totally my jam. I'm like, yo, let's go. But also I get you, I feel you. And it's so important to have like peers and guys that you can just relate to. And yeah, there's so many things clearly that, a 22-year-old just isn't going to understand, who doesn't have kids and isn't a single dad, right? Or whatever the thing is. So that's so important.
I don't get it. It's just
It's
just download Tinder. Swipe right, swipe left. Just kidding.
It's
cool. Thanks for the pro tip.
Says the guy who has a wife, whatever. But no, I mean, it's one of those things, it's like you said, I loved hanging out and doing things because I hadn't done that. I was for a long time, and I got to go to those concerts and hang out and be, with cool people, I guess is what you would say. But yeah, I had no one to talk to about things that I was going through. How do you talk to a 22-year-old about the feelings you're feeling after a divorce, or, the fact that your 6-year-old is doing this and they don't even know kids. It's like they are, almost.
Right.
So it was hard. And, it's, again, props to you for doing some really cool stuff over the last couple of years too. You guys did the reunion show in 2017, which I just heard this week, by the way. And man, it's like you guys, it almost sounds better live than it did on the album. And I don't mean to throw the album away, but man, live, it was really cool.
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, I'm smiling over here because, that's a huge compliment. Thank you. And yeah, no joke. Like, I mean, all ego aside here, it's like I walked off that stage going, we're better than we ever were. We did one rehearsal the day before that show, or the week before that show.
Wow, for real?
And yeah. And you put in the work, just like anything in life, you put in the work and it shows up, and I rehearsed my brains out without the band for 3 weeks before the show. I worked out super hard, I work out, but I put in a lot of extra cardio and plyo, and I did all the vocal warm-ups and did all the things and got myself in a place. And when you're prepared and you get to show up and do it, and it feels really good. We always joked around, we're like, if we do a reunion show, it must be better. You can't go do a reunion show as a band and be like, and people were like, oh man, it was cool. That's the worst thing ever. Yeah. Oh, they were cool, but man, it was so cool in 2004 when I saw them, you know what I mean? And so thank you for that compliment, because it's something that we were really proud of, and that, and I would agree, there's a lot, that album, the live album sounds really good. We worked really hard on it. Josh, our bass player, mixed it. Josh is amazing. Um,
Hmm.
and grateful for the guys who recorded that for us. And yeah, it came out great, and we were super happy with it. And it's fun for people to hear it. It's just it was cool. We always had the thing that a lot of people said that, like, dude, you guys put on the great, for years, how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of shows where people would say, oh man, you guys, I love your album, you guys are but you're so good live, and we love your live show, and I just wish you could capture that. And that's always the thing, how do we capture the album, the energy of the music on an album, right, and really do it justice. And not that I hate on those albums, but I you know putting that live album out was fun, because it was like, oh, there's the energy, there's the rawness of it. It's not perfect in
Yeah.
all of its ways, but it sounds good, and we're grateful for that. It was cool.
Two last things before you have to go. We are nearing our hour mark or so, but number one, how was it to play that live show and have your kids be around to see it? That must have been
Great
cool.
question, man. Great question. Well, that one was really cool because my kids were older. The first couple reunion shows we did, the first one, I remember my son being on his uncle's shoulders out in the crowd, and my son just staring at me like, oh my God, this is my dad. Um, he had, because he hadn't really seen me play before, just like little things, like with some friends or whatever, but not like playing a big show like that. And it's funny, when we were touring, I will never forget, like, specifically Wolf from POD, the drummer from POD. He would have his son out, and his son would wear like noise canceling headphones and be sitting there next to his dad with his drumsticks, watching his dad play. And I always remembered thinking, man, I hope I get to have kids someday, and for them to see me play music live, because it's just so fun. And so it was a huge moment for me. And that last show with the Supertones specifically was just really cool, because they were older, they were able to understand that they love music, and they listen to a lot of cool stuff, and they were like, whoa, dad, you were insane, you guys were so great. And so it just felt really good. And I think the bottom line about that is that it feels so good as a dad to be able to do something that you love so much, that you're so passionate about, that's so therapeutic, feels so connected with God and humans, and that they could experience that with me was a huge gift, man. It was beautiful.
That's awesome. Well, hey, just to end it, what does the future hold for a number of things? Number one, what's going on in the next year or so, and then also music-wise, are you doing anything in the future solo or with PAX or anything like that?
Yeah, it's great. Well, with me personally, I'm continuing to build this Tmpl group of guys, and we're expanding that to other people, to other men who are interested in being a part of something that goes quite deep and is super fun, and just really teaches on embodiment and what it's like to hold ground as a man and grow as a man, and physiologically, mentally, emotionally, and your awareness, your mindfulness, all these things. And so that's a big thing right now. I'm actually getting ready to launch the Tmpl podcast, which I'm really excited about. So that will be coming out
Nice.
probably first part of September. So if you're out there and you want to check out my podcast, I'd love for you to stop by, you and your ears and your heart, stop by. And if I can shamelessly promote here on
Absolutely, go for it.
thanks, guys. And then musically, I'm really excited. Actually, I've resisted putting out music for so long, for so many reasons, and yeah, I've recorded a bunch of demos for years and years and just never actually released much. I put out there's one song out under Tosti, the artist named Tosti, called Where, and that's out. And I've got two more songs in the mix right now that I'm hoping to finish up and hopefully to release sometime in September as well. And I'm so grateful. I'm really close friend of mine, Steve Wilmot, who is a producer, amazing guy who works with Ryan Tedder and Brent Kutzel, One Republic, for years and years and years. Has just been a huge support to me as a friend. He when we were kids, we used to play in bands together, and he was always encouraging me to get back out there and do stuff. And so I'm working on a couple tracks right now and looking forward to releasing those, like I said, in probably September. So that's kind of what I'm up to musically. And I've actually been I should also say that this last year during COVID, I was really grateful to be able to. I've been working with a friend of mine. His name is Nolan Gross, and he's an artist, a young artist. He's 18, and we just finished his second album, and I'm so proud of it. I got Steve Wilmot produced it. I co-wrote and was a part of production as well here and there, and playing on it, and it was just an amazing experience. And it's a great album. It's super dope. And also with an artist named Tree Hill, who's a spoken word artist, and she's an amazing, deep, profound, spiritually connected woman, and good friend of mine. So anyways, there's 2 projects that I was able to be a part of on a creative front, which was really, really freeing for me, especially during COVID when I wasn't being hired for any photo work at all, and just quite, had a lot of time, and was like, all right, let's make stuff. And so just had a beautiful time working with those artists. So check out Nolan Gross and Tree Hill, and then the stuff from Tosti coming soon.
Nice. Last thing for me, and I'm gonna ask you the same thing I asked Josh Kemble of Dogwood.
Oh, Josh, I love Josh.
Josh
was in my wedding.
Was he really?
Yeah, and I was in his.
Josh is a cool dude. I asked him the same question because I'm a huge Dogwood fan. I grew up at Dogwood from all the way back in the Through Thick and Thin album when they were on Rescue Records back in the day. But I asked him the same thing and ask you, will there ever be another PAX217 album coming out?
I can't imagine it at this time. I think there's a joke. The joke is this: bands don't break up; they just take breaks.
Yeah,
and and we've all seen that time and time again, and it's fun. But I think for us, there was a sort of like just really surrendering to and just letting it sit down and go, yeah, this was a cool season. This was an amazing, like, big block. I mean, it was like 12 years of my life that I put in, from 15 to 27, almost 28, where that's all I did was eat, sleep, and breathe PAX. And it was rad. And do I want to do it that way? Do I want to make music the same? No, it's probably not the thing for us, but it has been a gift to like get back together, do those reunions. I do have a little dream.
Here we go.
I do have a dream of I think it would be really fun to have for there to be some PAX217 songs being remixed, which would be incredible. So I've always kind of had this like back there, like, maybe we could like put out some remixes or something, or if some DJs came along. Somebody actually reached out to me recently who wants to remix a track, and I was like, awesome. And we haven't connected that yet, but we'll see. But maybe that's another iteration that just would be a fun thing to release a few things that were remixes, because it's all about the collab. And, that's cool. But
that's cool. Well, hey, thank you again for joining us. We're about to end the show. If you don't mind just hanging on for a few seconds while we say goodbye. But thank you again to David from PAX217. You can check him out online. We will have the links posted to all of his different areas that you can see his work in our YouTube site, and also on our Facebook and Spotify. So thank you very much for joining us again, David. And thank you guys at home for listening or watching. And thanks again.